It started with a splash that wasn't mine. At first, I thought the noise was just a branch hitting the pool cover or maybe one of the raccoons that sometimes came by at night to investigate the barbecue. But when I stepped out with my coffee and saw the shimmer of water rippling unnaturally in the early morning light, I knew exactly who it was. Karen. Again. There she was, floating in my pool like a smug walrus in her oversized sunglasses, sipping something from a neon-pink tumbler as if she were at a resort she personally owned. The sight alone made my coffee taste like chlorine. This was the third time in 2 weeks she'd jumped my fence and used my pool without asking. The first time, she'd claimed her community access, included it because I lived within the HOA boundary. The second time, she insisted she was inspecting it for code compliance. Now, apparently, she'd decided it was simply hers. I'd called the HOA president before, but he just sighed and said, "You know how Karen gets. Try to be neighborly." Which was HOA speak for, "We're too scared to confront her." I leaned against the railing and called out, "Enjoying the temperature test?" She froze mid-sip. Her head turned like an owl's, slow and defensive, trying to pretend she hadn't heard me. "Oh," she said brightly, "I thought no one was home." I raised my coffee mug. "That's funny, since my truck's in the driveway." Her lips tightened, then relaxed into that practiced faux-friendly grin she used at HOA meetings whenever she wanted to sound reasonable. "Well," she said, pushing her sunglasses up, "the community pool is closed for maintenance. You're technically part of the HOA area, and since your pool's visible from the street, it's a gray area." I stared. "A gray area? Karen, that's my backyard, not a public amenity." She splashed toward the edge, apparently oblivious to how insane that sounded. She climbed out, dripping chlorinated water all over the concrete, leaving a trail like a crime scene. Her towel, one of mine from the last time, was draped over my deck chair. "You really shouldn't leave this unlocked," she said, wringing her hair like she was giving me advice. "Anyone could just walk in." "Yeah," I said. "Like you." She laughed awkwardly, snatched the towel, and strutted off toward her yard. I watched her disappear through the gate, leaving it wide open behind her. I didn't even bother closing it right away. I was too busy wondering just how deep her entitlement could go. By that afternoon, she'd doubled down. I came home to find a note taped to my door with HOA letterhead, one she'd obviously printed herself. "Dear resident," it began, "your pool may be subject to community access per Covenant 8.3, which allows shared recreational resources for HOA members. Failure to comply could result in fines." It ended with her name, signed, Acting Compliance Liaison. I took a photo, emailed it to the actual HOA president, and got a one-line reply. "Ignore her. She doesn't have that position." Of course she didn't. But that didn't stop her from acting like she ran the neighborhood. The next morning, she was back. This time she brought guests. 2 of her friends, all in floppy hats and matching floats. They'd set up music, tinny pop songs from her phone, and were laughing loud enough to scare the bird. I stood by the sliding door, jaw tight. I wasn't the confrontational type, not immediately. I believed in strategy. Revenge served cold and documented. So I took photos. Then I took video. When she saw me recording, she yelled, "You can't invade my privacy like that." I said, "On my property?" She gestured wildly. "Technically shared boundary. HOA bylaws." She didn't finish. Probably because one of her friends started coughing from swallowing water mid-laugh. I shut the door before she could continue her nonsense. That night, I checked my security footage, her sneaking in at dawn, dragging a float under her arm. I saved everything. I was tempted to call the sheriff, but something told me that would be premature. She'd twist it, make me look like a problem neighbor. That's when I saw the unopened box I'd ordered last month still sitting in my garage corner. A 5-gallon container of pool dye concentrate. Neon blue. I'd bought it for a 4th of July pool lighting experiment I never got around to. I stared at the label, then at the security feed on my phone, paused on Karen's smug grin. And that's when the plan came together. The next day, I played nice. I waved to her from my driveway like nothing had happened. She narrowed her eyes, suspicious, then gave me her fake HOA smile. "Glad you're finally understanding the community spirit," she said. I nodded. "Absolutely. Enjoy it while it lasts." She didn't catch the tone. Most Karens never do. That evening, after the sun dipped low and the streetlights flickered on, I mixed the dye. 50 gallons total, diluted into buckets, each glowing faintly under the porch light. The directions said a single gallon could tint a large pool for weeks. I wasn't aiming for weeks. I was aiming for immediate, undeniable, public evidence. When the moon rose high, I poured it all in, watching the water swirl from clear to electric blue, like a science experiment gone rogue. The whole surface shimmered, reflecting the porch light like liquid sapphire. I knew exactly what would happen next, because she was nothing if not predictable. By morning, she'd be in there again, probably bragging about how she'd claimed the best pool in the HOA. And when she came out, dripping blue from head to toe, everyone would know. Sure enough, at 6:32 a.m., my phone pinged. Motion detected. I grabbed my coffee and peeked out the blind. There she was, sliding into the glowing blue pool with a sigh of satisfaction. Within seconds, her pale skin took on the tint of a cartoon smurf. I almost choked trying not to laugh. She didn't notice at first. She floated, splashed, flipped her hair like she was in a shampoo commercial. Then she looked at her hands. Then her arms. She screamed. Her shriek carried across the street, waking half the block. Her friend appeared at her fence in pajamas, staring in disbelief. "Karen, what the hell happened?" Karen stumbled out, dripping blue puddles across my deck. "He poisoned the pool," she shrieked. "He tried to kill me." She bolted toward her gate, still glowing like a malfunctioning avatar. I followed slowly, coffee in hand. "It's pool dye," I said calmly. "Harmless, non-toxic, decorative." She spun on me, teeth clenched. "You'll hear from the HOA." "Good," I said. "Tell them to check the footage." I gestured toward my security camera. She froze, realization dawning. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Within hours, she tried damage control. She called an emergency HOA meeting on the cul-de-sac, standing there with her arms crossed, blue stains still faintly visible around her neck. "This man," she began, "has been waging psychological warfare on me." The neighbors murmured, eyes darting between her and my driveway. I stayed quiet until she finished, then showed the video, her hopping my fence, lounging in my pool, trespassing again and again. Silence. One guy coughed. Another muttered, "You're kidding me." The HOA president finally spoke. "Karen, we're issuing you a fine for trespassing and harassment." She sputtered. "You can't fine me. I'm the one enforcing standards." "No," he said, "you're the reason we're rewriting them." That night, my phone buzzed with messages from neighbors. Laughing emojis, screenshots of memes someone made from her blue-stained face. I should have felt guilty, but honestly, I'd never slept better. The best part? The pool still had that faint sapphire hue for weeks. And every time I caught her looking from her yard, clutching her phone like she wanted to call someone but knew better, I just smiled. Some lessons really do need to be learned in vivid color. By the time the HOA meeting fallout settled, Karen had gone quiet for almost a week. It was eerie. No barking orders at the landscapers, no clipboard patrols around the neighborhood, no fake inspection notices taped to mailboxes. Just silence. I should have been grateful, but people like Karen don't vanish. They regroup. I knew she was in her house plotting something. The kind of quiet that builds before a thunderstorm. I kept busy, pretending to move on. The pool's blue tint faded slightly but not entirely. It still shimmered faintly like a gemstone, catching the sun in ways that made the neighbors smile when they walked by. A few even congratulated me. "You finally shut her down," one said, laughing. I shrugged modestly, playing innocent. "I just followed safety protocols. I said, sipping my coffee. But in truth, I knew the peace wouldn't last. Karen had lost face in front of everyone. That's the kind of wound an HOA Karen doesn't let scab. She picks it raw until she can find a way to look powerful again. The first hint came on a Tuesday morning. I woke to the rhythmic click-click-click of a camera shutter outside. I pulled back the blinds, and there she was, standing by my fence, wearing aviator sunglasses, holding a clipboard and a small camera, snapping photos of my backyard like she was gathering evidence for a court case. I stepped outside. "Good morning, paparazzi," I said. "Do I need to sign a release?" She didn't flinch. "I'm documenting violations," she said flatly. "There are zoning restrictions about non-standard pool coloration. You've altered the chemical balance. It's an environmental hazard." I blinked. "It's literally food-grade dye." "That's what you say," she countered, clicking another picture. "We'll see what the county says." I almost admired the audacity. She was building a new narrative, framing herself as the environmental crusader instead of the trespasser. "Be sure to get my good side," I said, and went back inside. By the afternoon, I had a certified letter taped to my door, a notice of pool chemical investigation. No official seal, just another one of her printouts with Environmental Subcommittee, written in Comic Sans. I decided not to react. Let her dig her own hole. But I did start documenting her. Every car that pulled into her driveway, every time she walked near my fence, every clipboard glance. I even installed an extra camera aimed toward the property line, not because I was paranoid, but because Karen had a pattern. When public embarrassment didn't work, she shifted to quiet sabotage. Sure enough, 2 nights later, my pool pump stopped working. Dead silent. I checked the breaker, the timer, the wiring, everything was fine. When I lifted the pump lid, I found the problem. Someone had stuffed it full of mulch and plastic grocery bags. A deliberate clog. I stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. It was so childish it almost impressed me. I cleaned it out, reset the system, and then repositioned my floodlight to point directly at the pump area. If she came back, she'd be lit up like a Broadway debut. The next day, I dropped by the actual HOA office with printed evidence. The real office, not the fantasy one in Karen's head. The manager, a middle-aged guy named Leonard, sighed when he saw my photos. "She's already been warned," he said. "We can't suspend her membership, but we can revoke her subcommittee privileges." "Subcommittee privileges?" I asked. "She doesn't even hold a position." Leonard smiled wearily. "She thinks she does." He promised to send an official cease and desist notice. When I returned home, I found Karen standing by her mailbox with 2 neighbors, whispering animatedly. The moment she saw me, she raised her voice. "Oh, there he is. The pool polluter himself." The neighbors looked uncomfortable. "Karen," I said calmly, "you're still trespassing when you step on my property line." "I'm within public access," she snapped. "The HOA bylaws clearly state that community drainage and visual continuity fall under group jurisdiction." I almost laughed. She'd clearly spent the night flipping through some legal dictionary until she found a phrase that sounded authoritative. That evening, I drafted my next move. It wasn't enough to catch her red-handed. I needed to expose her logic as ridiculous in a way she couldn't refute. Something visual, undeniable, poetic. I went online and ordered another batch of pool dye, this time red, purple, and green. I had a plan brewing that would make the neighborhood remember exactly what trespassing looks like. 2 mornings later, I was startled awake by a loud splash. It was 5:45 a.m., too early for anyone normal to be in my yard. I opened the blinds and saw a shape moving through the water. Karen again. She was back, as if the blue dye humiliation hadn't been enough. Maybe she thought time had softened the memory. Maybe she believed the HOA gossip had faded. Either way, she was wrong. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and stepped onto the deck. She froze mid-lap, caught like a raccoon in headlights. "Karen," I said, voice calm, "are we back to phase 1 now?" She looked at me, water dripping from her hair, and said something I'll never forget. "I'm conducting a water quality inspection." It was so absurd I actually laughed. "In a swimsuit? It's called full immersion testing," she snapped. "You wouldn't understand." I didn't argue. I just turned my phone to show the recording icon blinking red. "This time," I said, "I'll make sure the sheriff sees it." Her expression shifted, from superiority to genuine fear. "You can't post that online," she shrieked. "You're violating privacy laws." "Nope," I said. "Private property, public record of trespass." She climbed out of the pool in silence, clutching her towel like it could protect her from the truth. Within the hour, I drove to the sheriff's substation with the footage. The deputy watched it, frowned, then said, "You've got yourself a classic boundary problem." He filled out a report, promised to send someone by to have a chat with her. That evening, a patrol car rolled up in front of her house. I watched from my porch as the deputy knocked on her door. She came out all smiles at first, then her expression twisted when he mentioned my name. She gestured wildly toward my yard, talking fast. The deputy nodded, said something firm, then walked away. She stood there, shaking, before slamming her door so hard it rattled the mailbox. For 2 days after that, she stayed invisible. I thought maybe the message had finally sunk in. Then, on Friday night, the revenge came. I was watching TV when I heard the faint hiss of sprinklers. Only it wasn't the usual rhythm, it was a gush. I stepped outside and immediately smelled it. Chlorine. Way too much chlorine. My pool water had turned cloudy white, bubbling faintly. She dosed it. I didn't need proof. It had her fingerprints all over it. The same arrogance, the same passive-aggressive flair. I fished out an empty container from under my deck the next morning, her name written in Sharpie on the lid. Probably from her cleaning supplies. That's when I knew this wasn't just about property anymore. It was a power struggle. She wanted control, validation, to prove that she could break rules and still come out untouchable. But I had something she didn't: patience. And strategy. I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention it. Instead, I called a pool service company and asked them to test the water for foreign contaminants. They came out, took samples, and within 24 hours handed me a report confirming intentional chemical tampering. I attached the report to my previous sheriff's complaint. 2 days later, she found out. Maybe the deputy stopped by again. Maybe Leonard from the HOA mentioned it. Either way, she stormed across my lawn that evening, red-faced and trembling. "You're trying to ruin me," she shouted. "I know what you're doing. You're manipulating the system." "No, Karen," I said softly. "I'm just letting the system finally notice you." She froze, realizing how calm I was. That's when she made her mistake. She shoved me. Not hard, but enough. My security camera blinked red above us. She saw it. Her face drained of color. Then she turned and bolted, slamming her door behind her. That shove changed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't petty neighbor drama, it was assault. I didn't press charges right away, though. I wanted her to sweat, to wonder how deep she'd fallen. Over the weekend, she didn't leave her house once. Her blinds stayed drawn, her car untouched. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Everyone knew something had happened. They just didn't know what. On Monday morning, I checked my cameras again, half expecting another stunt. Instead, I saw her husband, quiet, usually uninvolved, carrying a stack of boxes into his truck. Moving boxes. Then I saw her, standing in the doorway, still glaring toward my yard even as he loaded the last one. She looked furious, defeated, and paranoid all at once. I didn't wave. I didn't say a word. I just turned back to my kitchen, poured another cup of coffee, and smiled. But something told me this wasn't over. People like Karen don't leave quietly. They come back in stranger, smaller ways: letters, calls, rumors. And sure enough, the next morning, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a printed notice. "You've been reported to the Environmental Health Department for illegal pool dyes and chemical misuse." Expect inspection. I laughed out loud. She might be moving, but she wasn't done fighting. That's when I decided. If she wanted one final round, I'd give her one to remember. I'd make sure the entire county saw just how far an HOA Karen would go when she couldn't control a pool. And this time, she'd out herself completely. The so-called inspection notice arrived on a Wednesday, printed on low-quality paper with a fake seal that looked like it was drawn in Microsoft Word. It was classic Karen, overly official-looking, but wrong in every detail. The heading read Environmental Compliance Division, yet it listed no county department, no phone number, no officer signature. Just a dramatic red stamp that said, Urgent Response Required. I held it up to the light and couldn't help grinning. She was still trying to play government official, like a suburban Bond villain armed with a printer and too much free time. Still, I played along. I taped the letter to my fridge like a trophy, poured another coffee, and opened my laptop. If Karen wanted to weaponize bureaucracy, I could do it better. I spent the next hour filing an official complaint through the county's actual Environmental Health Department website. Not against her, yet, but about the fraudulent notices being distributed under their name. I uploaded a scan of the inspection letter, added photos of her earlier fake HOA paperwork, and wrote a short note. I believe someone is impersonating county officials. Bureaucracy moves slowly, but when it does move, it crushes everything in its path. 2 days later, a real county officer showed up. He wore an actual badge, drove a white pickup with the county logo, and looked tired in the way only public employees who've dealt with suburban chaos can. "You the one who reported a fake notice?" he asked. "That's me," I said, leading him around back. He squinted at the pool, still faintly tinted from the blue dye weeks ago. "So what's the issue here?" I handed him the letter. He snorted. "We get these once in a while, neighbors trying to scare each other. Usually some HOA feud." "You could say that," I replied. He took photos, thanked me, and left. 20 minutes later, I saw his truck parked in front of Karen's house. I leaned against the window with my coffee and watched as he knocked on her door. She opened it, visibly defensive, arms crossed. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone said everything, him calm and methodical, her loud and frantic. After a few minutes, he handed her a paper and walked away. She stood there for a long time, staring at it like she couldn't believe the script had flipped. By evening, she struck back. I heard yelling before I saw anything, her voice echoing across the cul-de-sac, accusing me of falsifying government processes and stalking her property. I stepped outside and found her waving the county form like it was proof of something. "You think you're clever," she spat, "but you're the one under investigation now." The neighbors peeked out from their windows, one even recording on their phone. I smiled faintly. "Karen," I said, "I'm not under investigation. You are." She turned crimson. "You can't just make me look like a criminal." "You're the one impersonating one," I said quietly. The next morning, she was gone. Not moved out, just vanished for the day. Her car missing, her curtains drawn. It felt strange, like the air pressure had dropped in the neighborhood. No barking commands from her driveway, no sound of her phone blaring HOA gossip. I figured she was licking her wounds, or maybe lawyering up. I went about my day, working from my home office, the house unusually peaceful. Then, around noon, I noticed something odd. My backyard gate was open again. I walked out slowly. The latch had been snapped clean off, not broken by accident but pried apart with a tool. My stomach tightened. I scanned the yard and saw nothing immediately wrong, until I looked at the pool. It was green. Not just a little cloudy, but radioactive neon green. The surface shimmered like antifreeze. I didn't even need to test it to know what she'd done. Pool dye, again, but this time she'd gone for something industrial grade. Probably from her cleaning supplies or whatever toxic cocktail she used on her roses. I took a deep breath and recorded everything. Photos, videos, timestamp. Then I called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher recognized my address immediately. "Oh, the pool lady," she said. "We'll send someone." The deputy who showed up was the same one who'd warned her before. He walked around the backyard, shaking his head. "She really doesn't quit, does she?" he said. "Nope," I replied. "Persistence is her only consistent quality." He filled out another report, then walked next door. This time, she didn't open the door. He knocked 3 times before giving up. "We'll escalate it," he said. "If we can prove chemical contamination, it becomes property damage." "Good," I said. "She's overdue for consequences." That night, I drained the pool halfway, scrubbed the filters, and refilled it just enough to keep the pump from burning out. The dye still clung faintly to the edges like a bruise. As I worked under the floodlights, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Across the fence, a curtain twitched. She was watching me. I waved. The curtain snapped shut. For a few days, things went quiet again. I thought maybe the sheriff's visit finally hit home. But then came the whispers. At the mailbox, one neighbor asked, "Hey, is it true your pool leaked into the drainage system?" Another said, "Karen told us your dye killed her plants." I smiled tightly. She must have confused my pool with her conscience. But inside, I was seething. She wasn't fighting me directly anymore. She was running a smear campaign. Classic Karen strategy. Lose the battle, rewrite the story. That's when I decided I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd finish this. Once and for all. I started with preparation. I installed 2 new cameras. One overlooking the side yard where she liked to sneak in, and one facing her property line. Then I cleaned the pool completely and refilled it with crystal clear water. I wanted it pristine for what came next. Next, I ordered another dye batch. This time, invisible until contact. It was a novelty pool additive that turned bright fuchsia when mixed with any kind of lotion, oil, or sunscreen. Totally safe, completely undetectable until activated. The plan wasn't to hurt her. Just to expose her again. 3 days later, the opportunity arrived. I came home early one afternoon and heard faint laughter from my backyard. I froze. She was back. Through the blinds, I saw her lounging on a float, wearing a giant straw hat, sipping a drink like nothing had ever happened. It was surreal, like watching a bad sequel where the villain refuses to accept defeat. I hit record on my phone again and opened the sliding door. "Déjà vu, Karen?" I said. She glanced over lazily, like a queen acknowledging a peasant. "I spoke to legal counsel," she said. "They confirmed there's precedent for community access when amenities are visible from common areas." "Legal counsel?" I said. "You mean the HOA lawyer who told you to stop pretending to work for the county?" She ignored that. "You've been defaming me online," she said. "Everyone's talking about your little videos. That's harassment." I smiled. Funny, I thought trespassing was illegal. Harassment's just conversation. She splashed dismissively. "You can't prove anything." "Actually," I said, pointing to the corner, "that camera says otherwise." She twisted around just in time to see the little red light blinking at her. She went pale, but only for a second. "You can't use that footage without consent." "I don't need consent on my own property," I said. She climbed out, muttering, clearly frustrated but unwilling to admit defeat. I let her leave without another word. Because the real payoff was still coming. The next morning, as I drank my coffee on the porch, I saw her again, marching to her mailbox in a pastel tracksuit, talking loudly on her phone. That's when I noticed it. Her arms, her neck, even her legs, fuchsia. Neon pink streaks all over her skin like she'd rolled in highlighter ink. The dye had activated. I nearly spit out my coffee. She didn't notice at first, too busy yelling into her phone. But when she caught sight of her reflection in a car window, she froze. Her scream echoed down the street. What is this?" she shouted, rubbing furiously at her skin. It didn't help. The color just spread, darker and brighter. Neighbors peeked out, trying not to laugh. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, she's pink now." She spun around, spotted me watching from my porch, and pointed a trembling finger. "You did this," she screamed. "You poisoned me." "That's funny," I said evenly. "It's cosmetic-grade dye. The kind that reacts with sunscreen. You must have used a lot." Her jaw dropped. "I'm calling the sheriff." "Good idea," I said. "Tell them exactly what you were doing in my pool again." By the time the deputy arrived, half the neighborhood had gathered. He tried to keep a straight face as he listened to her rant about chemical warfare. "Ma'am," he said, "you do realize this only happens if you were in his pool?" She opened and closed her mouth like a fish, unable to find an excuse. It was over. Not legally. She wasn't in handcuffs, but socially. The woman who had once ruled the HOA with her clipboards and bylaws was now the punchline of every neighborhood joke. Memes started circulating. Someone photoshopped her face onto a bottle of pink body paint. Another edited her pool selfies to show her glowing like a flamingo. She disappeared inside her house for days, blinds shut tight. But even as the laughter died down, I couldn't shake one thought. People like Karen don't disappear. They mutate. They find new ways to reclaim control. And judging by the new stack of envelopes that appeared on my porch that Friday, each one stamped "Urgent HOA Action Required," I realized she wasn't finished yet. She'd stopped fighting me in person. Now she was fighting me on paper. And paper cuts, I knew, could bleed longer than bruises. The envelopes started piling up like snowdrifts on my porch. Each one had the same fake HOA logo, the same slanted signature, the same inflated threats about non-compliance and community conduct violations. One accused me of unapproved pool modifications. Another claimed I was disrupting neighborhood harmony through unauthorized surveillance. My favorite was the one that said, "Failure to respond within 48 hours will result in immediate lien consideration." It didn't even specify what kind of lien. It was like she just Googled scary legal words and sprinkled them at random. I didn't open most of them. I didn't need to. They were performance art by now, her desperate attempt to claw back control after her pink pool debacle. The neighbors saw through it too. Every time I walked the street, someone would smirk and ask, "Any new HOA mandates today?" Or, "Is your pool FDA approved yet?" Karen's reputation had sunk faster than her inflatable floatie that day she got caught on camera. But humiliation doesn't stop people like her. It just fuels them. One afternoon, I came home to find a fresh sign staked in my front yard. "Property under review by HOA Compliance Board." The bold red letters looked serious until you noticed the crooked alignment and the fact that "compliance" was spelled with an S. I stood there for a full minute, staring at it, then burst out laughing. She'd actually escalated to street theater. I pulled the sign out of the ground, carried it to her lawn, and stuck it directly in the center of her flower bed. That night, I heard something metallic scrape against my fence, then the faint sound of splashing. I flipped on the floodlight, expecting another trespassing attempt. But this time, she wasn't in the pool. She was at the pump again. Gloves on, hunched over like a burglar in a yard sale visor. "Evening, Karen," I called. She froze, shoulders tightening. "You're violating privacy boundaries," she shouted without turning around. "This is a compliance check." "For what?" I said. "Water temperature?" She bolted through the gate, slamming it behind her. I noticed she dropped something. A small plastic test strip container labeled pH sample kit. I picked it up and saw that the seal was broken, and the contents weren't pH strips at all. They were fertilizer granules. I didn't need a chemist to tell me what that would have done to my filtration system. The next morning, I printed out still frames from my security footage, her crouched by the pump, and dropped them off at the sheriff's office. The deputy sighed when he saw the name. "She again," he said. "She again," I confirmed. "You ever think about selling?" he asked. I laughed. "Not a chance. I'm starting to enjoy the show." He promised to forward the new evidence to the county prosecutor. By that weekend, the story had spread. not just through our neighborhood but into the next one over. Apparently, someone had posted a clip of her pink-skinned meltdown to a local Facebook group titled Suburban Shenanigans. It had thousands of views. People commented things like, "That's our HOA Karen," and legend says she's still exfoliating. She must have seen it, because 2 days later, her husband showed up at my door. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, expression beaten down by years of drama. "Look," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I nodded, motioning him inside. He stood awkwardly by the doorway, not making eye contact. "She's not well," he said finally. "All this with the HOA, it's her way of feeling in control. When the kids moved out, she kind of latched onto it." I didn't interrupt. "She won't listen to me. She's convinced you're trying to destroy her reputation." I nearly laughed at that but stopped myself. "I'm just trying to be left alone," I said. He nodded. "I know. I told her to stop. I even told her to apologize. But she thinks if she backs down, she'll lose everything." There was something almost sad about it, how deeply her identity was tied to being right. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I'll talk to her again. Maybe we can make this go away." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm sorry." I believed him. For a few days after that, it really did go quiet. No notes, no signs, no shouting. Her car didn't move from the driveway. I figured maybe her husband finally got through to her. But peace never lasts long with people who thrive on conflict. It started again one humid evening around dusk. I was grilling on the patio when I heard the crunch of gravel near the side fence. I turned just in time to see a figure dart behind my bushes. My phone was in my hand instantly, the camera app open. I crept closer, staying quiet. Through the slats of the fence, I caught sight of Karen, kneeling near the pool's drainage pipe, holding a bottle of something. I hit record. The label was visible even in the fading light. Manganese stain remover. Highly acidic. I didn't say a word. I just filmed her pouring it into the runoff drain, then walking back toward her house with that smug little tilt of her chin. When she disappeared inside, I called the sheriff again. This time, I emailed the video before they even arrived. 2 patrol cars pulled up within 30 minutes. Flashing lights painted the street red and blue as deputies knocked on her door. I stayed on my porch, silent, sipping a beer. She came out, face pale, robe half-tied, sputtering excuses. One deputy held up a printout of the video. Her voice cracked. "That's not me. That's a deep fake." The officer actually laughed. "Ma'am, you're wearing the same robe right now." They didn't arrest her, just issued a citation and took a formal statement. But the damage was done. Every neighbor who'd come out to watch saw her getting read her rights on the sidewalk. A couple of them clapped. Someone shouted, "Check the bylaws on that, Karen." The next morning, she retaliated with flyers. Every mailbox on the block had one. "Warning, neighbor engaged in cyber harassment and defamation." It read, complete with grainy screenshots of me standing by my own pool. I collected 5 copies just from the street corner. They'd be hilarious if they weren't so desperate. The HOA president called me personally that afternoon. "We're done protecting her," he said. "This is over the line." They scheduled an emergency board meeting for that weekend. Karen showed up in full battle regalia, blazer, clipboard, binder thick enough to choke a horse. I went too, mostly for the show. The meeting room was packed. She opened with a speech that sounded rehearsed, voice trembling with righteous fury. "This individual has waged a campaign of intimidation," she said, pointing at me like a prosecutor. "He's violated HOA privacy, spread false narratives, and endangered community stability." The president cut her off. "Karen, we've seen the videos. We've seen the citations. You trespassed, vandalized, and impersonated officials. This isn't a debate." She blinked, stunned that her usual tactics weren't working. "But he's manipulating the narrative. He's turning everyone against me." The treasurer spoke up. "You did that yourself. The room fell silent. Then someone in the back muttered, "Can we vote her off the board already?" The laughter that followed was low but unstoppable. Karen's face flushed scarlet. She tried to regain composure, flipping through her binder like it contained salvation. "You can't remove me without a hearing." "This is your hearing," the president said flatly. They voted unanimously. She was stripped of all HOA involvement effective immediately. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like she couldn't process it. For the first time since I'd moved into the neighborhood, she had no authority, no platform, no power. Just silence. I expected her to lash out that night, but instead, her house stayed dark. Curtains drawn. Car unmoved. For the next week, she was invisible. The tension in the neighborhood eased. Kids rode bikes again. People waved at each other without checking who was watching. It was almost normal. Then, one morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. Slow, hesitant, not her usual aggressive pounding. When I opened the door, it was her husband again. He looked even worse than before. "She's gone," he said simply. "Gone?" I asked. "Where?" "Her sister's. Out of state. She said she needed to clear her head." I didn't know what to say. Relief? Pity? Maybe both. He handed me a small envelope. "She told me to give you this." I took it inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note on floral stationery. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost childlike. "You humiliated me," it said. "You turned everyone against me. But you were right about one thing, I went too far. Don't think this means you won, though. People forget. And when they do, I'll be back to make things right." It wasn't exactly an apology. But for Karen, it was close. I folded the note, slid it into a drawer, and let out a long breath. 4 weeks afterward, the street stayed quiet. The HOA meetings went back to discussing mulch color and mailbox height. The pool sparkled again, unbothered and drama-free. But every so often, I'd catch myself glancing toward her empty driveway, half expecting to see her standing there, clipboard in hand, ready to start another crusade. I thought that chapter of my life was over. I was wrong. Because 2 months later, a new notice appeared on my door. This time, real letterhead, real county seal. Subject: Environmental Review Request, Anonymous Complaint Filed. And at the bottom, typed in neat black ink, was a single sentence that made my stomach drop. Complainant asserts repeated illegal discharge of dye-based materials into community runoff system. Karen was back. Just not in person. The county notice sat on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb. I must have read it 20 times, looking for some clue that it was another fake, but this one was real. The seal was embossed, the contact information verifiable, the inspector's name listed with an official extension. It wasn't Karen's usual amateur production. No typos, no Comic Sans, no grandiose titles. This came from someone inside the system. Which meant she'd gone professional, weaponizing bureaucracy for real this time. I called the number listed. A calm woman answered, "Environmental Quality Department, this is Officer Ramirez." I introduced myself and mentioned the notice. "Ah yes," she said. "You're scheduled for inspection next Friday morning. It's a standard runoff check based on an anonymous complaint." I asked, "Can you tell me what the complaint says exactly?" She hesitated, then read. Alleged improper disposal of chemical dyes and non-compliant discharge affecting neighborhood stormwater systems. Her tone implied she'd read dozens of these before. "Should I be worried?" I asked. "If you've got nothing to hide," she said, "it'll be fine." Nothing to hide had become my unofficial motto these past few months. Still, I knew better than to walk into anything unprepared. I spent the weekend gathering every piece of documentation I had, purchase receipts for the food-grade dye, the pool service reports showing non-toxic chemicals, even the county's own letter clearing me from the earlier fake complaint. By Sunday night, I had a folder thick enough to make a lawyer proud. But Karen wasn't content to let the bureaucrats handle it quietly. The morning after the notice arrived, I caught her husband outside collecting mail. He avoided eye contact. I decided to test the waters. "So," I said casually, "looks like your wife's still thinking about my pool." He looked like he wanted to melt into the pavement. "She didn't file that," he muttered. "She's not even here." "Then who did?" I asked. He just shook his head. "She's been calling people. Old HOA contact. Trying to convince them to do something about you." He sighed heavily. "She says it's not revenge, it's justice." Justice. That was her new word. It explained the change in tone. No more shouting, no more fake signs, just quiet manipulation through official channels. I wasn't dealing with a chaotic neighbor anymore. I was dealing with someone who'd learned to fight through paperwork. By Thursday, word had spread again. A few neighbors stopped by to ask if the rumors were true, that the EPA was coming to investigate me. I corrected them, but it didn't matter. Gossip had already turned it into a scandal. One even asked if my pool was dumping toxins into the lake. I smiled politely and said, "Only if you count sarcasm as hazardous waste." The inspector showed up right on schedule, Friday, 9 a.m. on the dot. She was brisk, professional, and all business. "Mr. Pierce," she asked. I nodded. "Mind if I take a few samples?" "Go right ahead," I said, handing her my folder. "Here's everything that'll save you time." She looked mildly impressed. "Most people don't come this prepared." "Most people don't have a neighbor like mine," I replied. She tested the water, checked the runoff drains, photographed the filter, and even asked about the dye incident. I explained everything: how the dyes were safe, how the trespassing led to the first incident, how the rest was retaliation. She listened carefully, asked a few clarifying questions, and then said something that made my day. "Honestly, I've seen this before. Not your exact situation, but neighbors weaponizing complaint. Usually ends the same way: the liar overplays their hand." When she left, I felt lighter. Vindicated, even. I imagined Karen somewhere in her sister's guest room, waiting for an update, convinced her anonymous complaint would ruin me. Instead, it would backfire beautifully. But, as always, the victory came with an aftershock. That weekend, my mailbox overflowed again, but not with fake letters this time. They were real. The HOA had reopened an investigation into my community conduct, citing new information from the county. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors. "Karen's talking again. She's back in town." I didn't even bother confirming it. I could feel her presence before I saw her. That peculiar tension in the air, like static before lightning. She didn't come to my door or shout across the street this time. She was smarter now. She played it quiet, moving behind the scenes, whispering into the right ears, twisting facts into stories that sounded almost plausible. The kind of half-truths that spread faster than lies. By Monday, 3 HOA board members had called an emergency session. I was invited, technically. When I showed up, Karen was already there, sitting smugly in the back like a queen reclaiming her throne. She wore sunglasses indoors, a thin smile plastered across her face. "Mr. Pierce," the president began awkwardly, "we've received a notice from the county regarding an environmental inspection of your property." I nodded. "Yes, it's already done." I passed. Karen let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you think you did." She'd brought props this time. Printouts of old photos, screenshots, and what looked like my own posts from the neighborhood group taken out of context. "This individual," she said theatrically, "has a documented history of contaminating public water sources and spreading defamatory content against this HOA." "Defamatory content?" I said. "You mean facts." "Facts don't trend online," she snapped. The president tried to maintain order, but she kept talking over him. "He's obsessed with me. He's been filming me for months, spreading videos." "You trespassed on my property," I interrupted. "Multiple times." "Allegedly," she said smoothly, regaining composure. "All I did was exercise my right to ensure community compliance." The room went silent. It was like she'd rehearsed it. Then, in a move that caught even me off guard, she produced a small flash drive. "This," she said, holding it up, "contains evidence of his continued misconduct." She handed it to the board. My stomach sank, not because I was guilty, but because I didn't know what she'd fabricated this time. The president plugged it in. The screen flickered to life. The footage was of my yard, but not my security camera footage. It was from hers. She'd installed a camera high enough to overlook the fence line, pointed directly into my backyard. The timestamp matched the night I drained my pool after she dumped chemicals in it. From her angle, it looked like I was pouring something into the ground. Out of context, it looked bad. "Do you see?" she said triumphantly. "Illegal disposal. Exactly what the county's investigating." I kept my voice calm. "So to prove I violated privacy laws, you violated privacy laws?" The room murmured. One of the board members frowned. "Karen, did you record this without consent?" "It's for community safety," she said defensively. "We have the right to monitor shared boundaries." "That's not a shared boundary," I said evenly. "That's my property. And I have proof you installed that camera without HOA authorization." I pulled out my phone and opened a folder of screenshots. I'd already spotted her camera weeks ago, hidden inside a fake birdhouse near her gutter. My footage from the night before showed her adjusting it. I handed the phone to the president. He stared, then looked back at her. "Karen," he said slowly, "this is an invasion of privacy." For once, she looked rattled. That's taken out of context." "Like your entire argument," I said. The vote that followed wasn't even close. The board dismissed her complaint outright, fined her for unauthorized surveillance, and banned her from attending meetings for 60 days. It was the longest silence I'd ever heard from her direction. As I left the meeting, she followed me into the parking lot. Her voice was a whisper now, brittle and venomous. "You think this is over?" she said. "You humiliated me twice. You ruined my standing. I'll find another way." I smiled. "You always do." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't bluffing. Karen's ego couldn't handle permanent defeat. If she couldn't win through the HOA, she'd find another weapon. I just didn't expect what came next. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from my home insurance provider. My policy was being temporarily suspended pending review of environmental liability claims. There it was again, her favorite word, environmental. She'd filed a claim alleging that my pool runoff had devalued surrounding property. The company had to investigate. They froze my coverage until the case was resolved. I called immediately. The representative was sympathetic but firm. "Until we get the county's final report, we can't reinstate your policy." I hung up, seething. It wasn't just inconvenience anymore, it was calculated sabotage. She was trying to bleed me dry through red tape. I checked my cameras again that night, making sure they were all running. The feeds were clean. No movement, no trespassing. But around midnight, I noticed something strange. The reflection of headlights moving slowly down the alley behind my house. I zoomed in. A silver sedan idled near the fence. The license plate was partially visible. I knew that car. Her husband's. The next morning, I went out back and found tire tracks in the gravel near the storm drain. Fresh. There was also something else. An empty jug half buried in the dirt. The label read Pool Shock Treatment, Industrial Strength. I didn't even need to test it to know what it meant. She wasn't just filing false claims anymore. She was planting evidence. For the first time since this war began, I felt something close to fear. Because this wasn't just a feud now, it was criminal. And Karen had finally crossed a line that even she couldn't talk her way out of. So I made a decision. If she wanted a war in the open, she'd get one. But this time, I wasn't playing defense. This time, I'd make sure every agency, every board, every neighbor saw exactly who she was and what she'd done. And when it was over, she wouldn't just lose her standing, she'd lose her mask. When I woke up the next morning, my backyard felt different, too quiet, too still. The pool was calm, the surface glassy, but the air carried that strange, charged silence that always came before one of Karen's storms. I stood on the deck, coffee in hand, and studied the evidence again. The jug of industrial-grade pool shock half buried in the gravel, the faint tire tracks, the camera footage from the night before showing her husband's sedan idling by the fence. This wasn't another prank or power play. She'd crossed into criminal territory. Dumping industrial chlorine near the storm drain wasn't just sabotage. It was a felony-level environmental offense. And if I handled it right, this could be the end of her entire campaign. I spent that morning documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, video clip. I even collected soil samples from around the jug, sealing them in labeled bags. Then I wrote an email to Officer Ramirez, the county environmental inspector who'd handled the fake complaint weeks earlier. I attached the files and wrote, "You might want to see this. Possible illegal dumping by the same party who filed the previous false report." She replied within an hour, "Do not touch or dispose of the container. I'll be there this afternoon." While waiting, I checked the neighborhood Facebook group, my guilty pleasure for tracking Karen's gossip trail. Sure enough, she was back at it, posting long, self-righteous rants about irresponsible homeowners contaminating shared spaces and corruption in local enforcement. The comments were mostly eye-roll emojis and popcorn gifs, but a few newcomers seemed to take her seriously. It amazed me how she could spin any narrative into a martyr story. She wasn't fighting me anymore, she was performing for her audience. Officer Ramirez arrived just after lunch, wearing gloves and carrying evidence bags. She examined the jug, the tracks, and my camera footage, then exhaled sharply. "This isn't residential grade," she said. "It's commercial concentrate. Whoever left this knew exactly what they were doing." I didn't have to say who. She knew. "I'll file an environmental hazard report," she continued. "If it's connected to your neighbor, she's in serious trouble." That night, the sheriff's deputies came again, 2 cars this time. They collected the jug, took statements, and said they'd be following up with both me and Karen. I asked if they'd arrest her. The senior deputy shook his head. "Not yet. But she's running out of excuses." I thought I'd sleep well after that, knowing the law was finally on my side. But around 2 in the morning, I woke to a faint humming. At first, I thought it was the pool pump again. Then I realized it was coming from outside, near the fence. I slipped on my shoes, grabbed a flashlight, and crept out. The sound grew louder, mechanical. And then I saw it. A drone. Small, silver, hovering above my yard. Its camera lens glinted red as it swept across the pool, my deck, and the security cameras themselves. It darted back toward the direction of Karen's house, vanishing over the roofline. My pulse quickened. She'd upgraded her surveillance tactics. I checked my footage the next morning. Sure enough, the drone had appeared several times over the past few nights, always at roughly the same hour. The timestamps were precise, methodical. This wasn't random snooping, it was reconnaissance. I filed another report with the sheriff's office and forwarded copies of the footage to Officer Ramirez, who replied, "If she's operating that drone for evidence collection, it's an invasion of privacy. Keep documenting." The neighborhood buzzed with rumors by then. Everyone knew Karen was spiraling, though few understood the full extent of it. Some said she'd been banned from multiple community groups. Others claimed she was facing HOA sanctions in her sister's neighborhood too. Her husband had stopped showing up entirely. His car sat unused in the driveway, gathering dust. It was like she'd become a ghost in her own house. Except ghosts don't send letters to insurance companies and operate surveillance drones. By Thursday, I received another visit, this time from a man in a navy suit carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Pierce," he said, "I'm representing your insurer. We're reviewing the environmental liability claim." His tone was polite but guarded, the way people sound when they suspect they're walking into a circus. I invited him in, poured coffee, and handed him my documentation. "You're going to want to watch the footage," I said. An hour later, he looked up from the screen, expression hard to read. "If what I'm seeing here is accurate," he said slowly, "your neighbor's the one committing violations, not you." "Exactly," I said. "And she's been using your company's policy system to harass me." He nodded. "We'll handle it internally." He closed the laptop, stood, and added, "You'll be reinstated within 48 hours. And I'll make sure our legal department forwards this to local enforcement." That was the first time I saw real momentum shift. The county, the sheriff, the insurance company, all converging on the same conclusion. But Karen wasn't done fighting. She never accepted losses gracefully. That evening, as I watered the plants near my deck, I heard her voice for the first time in weeks, shrill, strained, and unmistakably furious. "You think you've won?" she yelled from across the fence. "You think people don't see through your act?" I didn't even look up. "Evening, Karen. Enjoying the view from your drone?" "You're destroying this community," she screamed. "You've poisoned the water, lied to the authorities, humiliated me." "You did that yourself," I said calmly. There was silence for a moment, then a sound that made me freeze, the metallic click of a lighter. I turned just in time to see her toss something over the fence. A small plastic bag arced through the air and hit the water with a faint splash. Instinct took over. I ran, grabbed the net pole, and scooped it out. The bag was half melted from whatever was inside. The smell hit me instantly, gasoline. I hurled it into the gravel and backed away, heart pounding. "Karen!" I shouted. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Her voice trembled now, not with anger but desperation. "You ruined me. You made me a joke." Then her back door slammed shut. I called 911. Within minutes, 2 squad cars and a fire truck were outside. The firefighters neutralized the gasoline residue while deputies questioned me and checked the property line. They knocked on her door repeatedly, but no one answered. Her lights were off, her car still parked. That night, I barely slept. I sat by the window, watching the quiet shape of her house under the street lamp. Every few minutes, I expected to see her shadow move past the blinds. But nothing. Just stillness. The next morning, the deputies returned with a warrant. They searched her property while a small crowd of neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering. After 20 minutes, one of the officers carried out a laptop and a box of labeled containers, the kind used for chemical storage. Another carried a silver drone. The sheriff himself arrived soon after. He came over to me, expression grim. "You were right," he said. "We found containers of pool dye, chlorine concentrate, and gasoline. We also found correspondence, emails to county offices, insurance agencies, even local news outlet. All of it traced back to your address. She's been impersonating you." It took a moment to sink in. She was pretending to be me? Yes. Sending false reports under your name. She even made a fake email address. Same name, different domain. He sighed. "She's clever. But she's done." Karen was arrested that afternoon. They led her out in handcuffs while a dozen neighbors watched from driveways and porches. Her head was down, her hair messy, her voice hoarse from shouting as the sheriff read her rights. Her husband stood by the mailbox, expression blank, like a man too drained to feel anything. When the car doors closed and the flashing lights faded down the street, an uneasy silence followed. No one cheered. No one spoke. It was over, but it didn't feel like victory, just exhaustion. That night, the HOA president stopped by with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "To peace," he said, pouring one for each of us. "And to the end of whatever that was." "Chaos," I said. It was chaos. We clinked glasses and sat on the porch, watching the stars reflect in the pool's calm water. Over the next week, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. The county cleared me of every accusation. My insurance was reinstated. The HOA removed Karen's name from every record, striking her from committees and mailing lists. The grass started growing again along the fence line she used to patrol like a warden. Kids played outside without parents warning them to stay away from that house. And yet, even with all the calm, I couldn't shake the sense that I was living in the eye of a hurricane. Quiet, yes, but temporary. A few days later, her husband came by one last time. He looked smaller somehow, like a man trying to shrink out of existence. "She's being evaluated," he said softly. "Psychiatric hold. They say she'll get help." I nodded. "She needs it." He handed me an envelope. No threats this time, just a single line written in her looping, careful handwriting. "You dyed the water once. I dyed everything else." I didn't know whether it was an apology or a warning. I folded it and burned it in the fire pit without another thought. As the flames died, I looked at my reflection in the pool. For the first time in months, it was perfectly clear. No dye, no shimmer, just clean, still water. And yet, somewhere deep down, I knew the peace wouldn't last forever. People like Karen don't disappear completely. They just find new ponds to poison. Still, as I turned off the lights and headed inside, I told myself that, for tonight at least, the water was calm. And that was enough. It's strange how quickly a neighborhood forgets. 3 months after the arrest, Karen had become a ghost story, a cautionary whisper parents told new homeowners about the woman who went too far with HOA rules. The gossip burned bright for a while, then dimmed into legend. The board moved on, repainting fences and scheduling community barbecues, as if bleach and gasoline hadn't nearly turned our cul-de-sac into a crime scene. But I didn't forget. You don't forget someone like her. Even after the sirens faded and the last deputy's tire tracks disappeared, her presence lingered, like chlorine on your skin that won't wash off. The first sign came in the form of a letter. Real postage, handwritten address, no return name. I almost threw it away, assuming it was another HOA survey or junk mail. But something about the tidy penmanship made me pause. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. "Dear neighbor," it began, "I hope you're doing well. I've been reflecting on everything that happened, and I want you to know I understand now why you did what you did. I forgive you. I also want you to forgive me. The HOA doesn't define me anymore. But I'll always believe in keeping our community beautiful. Warm regards, Karen." There was no address, no postmark that told me where it came from. Just the date 2 days earlier. I stood there in my kitchen, letter trembling slightly in my hand, wondering how she even got my mailing address from outside the county. She shouldn't have access to anything related to our HOA anymore. I thought about calling the sheriff, but what would I even report? My former neighbor sent me a polite letter? It wasn't threatening, at least not on the surface. But something about it felt off. The phrasing. The way she wrote, "I'll always believe in keeping our community beautiful," like it wasn't just nostalgia, but a warning. I filed it away in a drawer and tried to forget about it. The next few weeks were uneventful. I fixed the pool deck, replaced the fence panels she'd warped with her fertilizer stunt, and started letting the neighborhood kids swim again. For the first time in nearly a year, the laughter didn't sound like mockery. It sounded like life. Then, one night, I noticed something odd while closing the curtains: the faint glow of headlights idling across the street. The car was parked in the shadows near the old oak tree, engine humming softly. Too far to see who was inside. I watched for 5 minutes. It didn't move. Eventually, it drove off, slow and deliberate. I told myself it was nothing. Probably a teenager or a lost delivery driver. But the next night, it was there again. Same car. Same spot. I started setting my cameras to motion detection. 2 days later, my phone pinged at 3:14 a.m. Motion detected. Driveway. I opened the feed and froze. Someone was standing at the edge of my lawn, just outside the reach of the floodlight. The figure was small, bundled in a hoodie, holding what looked like a phone. I zoomed in. The person was filming my house. Slowly, methodically. I called the sheriff's office again. The deputy arrived within 15 minutes, checked the footage, and frowned. "You can't see their face," he said. "Could be anyone." "Could be her," I said. He hesitated. "Last I heard, she's still in treatment." "Treatment doesn't mean supervision," I replied. "And her husband's car's been back in the driveway for a week." That caught his attention. "She's back?" he asked. "Looks that way." He promised to patrol the area more frequently, but I could tell from his tone that he didn't think it was serious. People like Karen wear normalcy like a costume. They look stable until the moment they don't. 2 nights later, it escalated. I came home late from work to find my backyard lights flickering. The motion sensors had been tampered with, angled upward toward the sky. My gate latch was loose again, freshly scratched like someone had pried at it. My pool? Still calm, still clear. But there, right in the center, floated something round and silver. A coin. Not just any coin, a commemorative HOA token. The ones she used to hand out at meetings as Community Excellence Awards. I hadn't seen one in months. I fished it out with the net, heart pounding. It was scratched down the middle, and on the back, etched in uneven letters, were the words, "Still watching." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the street through the blinds. Every noise sounded amplified, the distant hum of sprinklers, a dog barking 3 houses down, a car door slamming somewhere on the next block. By morning, I felt half mad with paranoia. I called her husband, though I hadn't spoken to him since the day she was arrested. He answered after several rings, voice heavy and resigned. "I know why you're calling," he said before I could speak. "She's not supposed to be in the neighborhood." "Then why is she?" I asked. "Because she won't let go," he said softly. "She told her doctors she needed to see what forgiveness looks like." They thought it was poetic. I should have known better. He promised to speak to her to make sure she stays away. But promises meant nothing in this war. The next few days, I tried to reclaim normalcy. I even hosted a barbecue. Neighbors, kids, laughter. Everyone eager to move past the insanity. But the entire time, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even when I smiled, even when I grilled burgers, my eyes kept drifting to the fence line. And that's when it happened. Just after sunset, as the sky burned orange over the rooftops, someone screamed. A raw, animal sound that sliced through the laughter. Everyone turned. The sound came from the cul-de-sac entrance. I ran. There, standing in the middle of the street, was Karen, barefoot, wild-eyed, clutching a stack of papers that fluttered in the evening wind. "They're all liars," she shrieked. "All of you." Her hair was tangled, her skin pale and blotchy from what looked like days without sleep. The sheriff's cruiser screeched around the corner within minutes, lights flashing. As they approached, she threw the papers into the air, hundreds of them, floating like white confetti. Flyers. Each one a printout of my face, my name, and the words, "Environmental criminal, still polluting our community." The deputies restrained her gently, speaking in low voices. She didn't resist this time. She just kept repeating, "He ruined everything. He died the truth." Over and over. They led her away again, her bare feet slapping softly against the pavement. The flyers scattered across lawns, caught in hedges, plastered against mailboxes. The neighbors stood frozen, not sure what to do. I started collecting them quietly, one by one, until my hands were full. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I burned them in the fire pit, the edges curling black, the ink bleeding into the flames. I told myself this was it. The final unraveling. She'd go back to the facility, maybe for good this time. But the universe has a dark sense of humor. 2 weeks later, I received an email. No subject line. No sender name, just a random address string. I clicked it open. There was a single attachment, an image. It was a photo of my pool. Taken from above. The timestamp read 2:07 a.m., the same time my cameras had glitched the night before. The water was tinted faintly blue again, eerily similar to that first time months ago. Underneath the image, one line of text. I told you I'd keep the community beautiful. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd be sick. I ran outside, floodlights blazing. The pool was normal, clear, quiet, undisturbed. No footprints, no signs of intrusion. But the camera feed had indeed gone dark for exactly 4 minutes at 2:07 a.m. I called the sheriff again, forwarded the email, but they traced it to a burner address. Untraceable. We'll flag it, the deputy said, but unless she shows up in person again, there's not much we can do. Days passed. Then weeks. The emails stopped. The neighborhood slipped back into its easy rhythm. Her husband sold the house quietly, moved out in the middle of the night. A young couple with a golden retriever bought it 2 months later. They waved when they saw me. They didn't know the history. Maybe it was better that way. Still, every once in a while, when the wind is still and the water perfectly flat, I catch a flicker of something under the surface. A shadow, a ripple, a hint of blue that shouldn't be there. Maybe it's just the light. Maybe it's my imagination. Or maybe it's the reminder that people like Karen never really disappear. They just find new ways to linger. Subtle, invisible, waiting for the right moment to disturb the calm again. The HOA replaced her name on every record, deleted her posts, and pretended she'd never existed. But I know better. The lake at the end of the subdivision still carries faint traces of dye from the runoff she caused. It glows faintly under the moonlight, a ghostly blue reminder of how far she was willing to go for control. Sometimes, when I sit on the deck at night, I swirl my coffee and watch the reflection of my porch light dance across the water. I think about how easy it is for ordinary people to turn monstrous when given a tiny bit of power. A clipboard, a rulebook, a petty grievance, that's all it takes. I kept the first letter she ever sent after the arrest. The one that said she forgave me. It sits in a drawer next to my county inspection report and the HOA expulsion notice bearing her name. A file labeled Karen Incident. Every now and then, I think about throwing it all away. But I don't. Because history has a habit of repeating itself, and if she ever comes back, I want to be ready. The pool remains flawless now. No dye, no intrusions, no midnight splashes. But sometimes, when the street's asleep and the crickets go quiet, I swear I hear it, the faint sound of water shifting. Like someone slipping in unseen, holding their breath beneath the surface, waiting. And that's when I lock the gate, double-check the cameras, and tell myself the same thing I've said every night since this began. If she ever jumps my pool again, I'll be ready.